Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. With the transfer portal winding down, you're starting to get a better feel for what these programs are looking like heading into spring practice, fall camp, and that 2024 season. Starting our position group deep dives for the 2024 year. And we're starting with a unit there that we've talked a lot about, and that is the Nebraska offensive line. Really excited to get into this one. A group that I thought made some real strides from week 1 in 2023, from what you saw in that last game against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and a special shout out to the Nebraska fans. We've had just a blast talking about this program and what they've done in the transfer portal the last couple of weeks, and the amount of support from the Nebraska fans has truly been amazing. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This Sunday, we got Nebraska's offensive line. Next Sunday, we're diving into my favorite unit, the Nebraska defensive line. Excited to start our deep dives into this program. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you, give you a little tee box here. Nebraska offensive line heading into 2024. How we feeling?
I think to echo what you said, the biggest thing was that development. I mean, from that Minnesota game to that Michigan State and that Iowa game at the end of the year, it just looked like it got so much better, so much tougher. And that was like the big thing you were kind of looking for, because even under Scott Frost, you kind of saw talent there. You saw guys who you thought could blossom into something, and just the development that took place in that offensive line unit especially was so disappointing, and I think was such a big part of why the Scott Frost era kind of worked out the way it worked out. So to see what this new coaching staff did in this first year, led by Matt Rule, I mean, just massive seeing that development, because that's what you need, and you didn't have it enough.
Agreed. And I want to start with just some overall takes on what I saw from this Nebraska offensive line, and especially towards the end of the year. One, this group individually, I think, played really good football, right? There was not a lot of guys that were just getting beat clean. Some of the things that I realized and kind of took away from watching some of these games back and looking at the numbers, the communication with the Nebraska offensive line was probably the thing that you need to see improve heading into 2024, right? In terms of picking up blitzes, in terms of dealing with stunts. And when you look at how the Nebraska season went in 2023, it kind of makes sense, right? There was a lot of injuries that happened. There were a lot of shuffling in terms of who was starting on the starting five each and every game. So from a talent standpoint and from a personnel standpoint, I think it's there. I think this group needs to kind of gel a little bit together, know how to pick up those blitzes, those stunts. And Dill, you noted it before we went live. A lot of the communication problems, not only for a new offensive line and kind of an offensive line that had a lot of new bodies and faces from week to week, but you had a lot of different quarterbacks. You had a very young running back. So when you're talking about blitz pickups, quarterback, running backs, there's a lot of other things that were at play than just this Nebraska offensive line that probably explains some of the lack of communication that you saw during the back half of that season.
Yeah, that is honestly a huge thing. I think people just kind of discounting it. And again, that offensive line took a beating, and I didn't think they were playing great at the beginning of the year.
No.
So it's not like to absolve them completely. I did think it got better for sure, but at the start of the year it was slow. But I think you're right. Like when you have a quarterback situation that's as bad as what Nebraska had last year, and you have quarterbacks who really can't sit in the pocket and make things happen. They're squirrely in the pocket. They run out. They're turning the ball over. It's really hard to play offensive line for that, because again, teams don't really need to respect you throwing the ball downfield. They can key in on you and get after you a little bit in your place, what you want to do. So I just think, again, the way the offense ran, I think was not conducive to any unit looking particularly good. But again, I thought once you kind of did start to see the offense kind of find itself a little bit, and again, it wasn't like ever pretty at any point, but it got better, I thought. Then that offensive line really started to play okay.
And going back to like what you said, this Nebraska team had to it was a little bit of cobbling together an offense, right? I mean, they really didn't have a downfield passing attack that you could rely on. So you're doing a lot of different things. You're running a lot of different protections. You're trying to get the quarterbacks outside the pocket and moving pockets. I think that also contributed to like the Nebraska offensive line struggling at points. But I want to go back to, like, I really do think this unit from an individual talent standpoint got better. Like, I thought you saw Teddy play really good. Justin Evan Jenkins, who we're going to talk about. And one other thing before we kind of move into what we think the depth chart is going to look like, and talking about some individual players, is Nebraska had to do a lot of different things in the run game as well. And why did they have to do that? Because you saw 8-man boxes pretty consistently. Because again, like you said, teams didn't really leave two safeties high because they weren't very concerned with what Nebraska could do attacking that deeper third in the passing game. And so what did you have to kind of do from a running game standpoint is do some different things, because it is very hard to line up and run at a defense that's loading the box and kind of expecting you to run the football. And so they're running a lot of stretch zones and doing a lot of different things that, again, from a personnel standpoint,
everything had to get to the boundary and everything had to be outside, because you're right. Teams knew that was like, honestly, you look back to the start of the year, that was one of the things that worked, is their ability to kind of pound the ball inside. But once teams took that away, you did start to see Nebraska have to change their run game to a lot more quarterback run, a lot more stuff to the outside, reverses, end arounds, like that type of thing. And it just wasn't so conducive to what their personnel was.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is an offensive line that you want to get downhill with them. And when you see them blocking their best, it's not with those stretch zone concepts. It was with like, hey, we're going to down block. We're going to run some power schemes. We're going to get some pullers. That's how this Nebraska offensive line from a personnel standpoint was built. And you want to get back to that in 2024, and having a little bit more of a reliable and explosive passing attack is certainly going to help that. Now, Dill, diving into the depth chart a little bit, I want to start on the interior offensive line and give a shout out to what I think could be a very good unit in 2024. Ben Scott coming back as a veteran center kind of nails. And I thought he was one of those guys that really played better towards the end of the season. The guy I want to shout out right now, Justin Evans-Jenkins. I think he is going to be a stud for this Nebraska offense in 2024. You look at what Nebraska wants to do. I mean, this is a guy that he's not built for kind of playing east and west. He wants to get downhill. He wants to play with low pads and move people off the line. And when you saw them ask him to do that, that's when he's playing his best football. And they just didn't do that enough at times in 2024. Justin Evans-Jenkins, a guy that I think can be a star. And then Micah Mazuka. Right, you have maybe a hole that you want to fill on that inside. You go out and get a guy that has been a Power 5 starter at Baylor and at Florida. And again, one of those maulers. He's got some nasty. He was kicked out of a Florida game for getting in a fight. I mean, again, you don't want him getting kicked out of the game for getting in fights, but you want that nasty on your offensive line. That inside with those three, you could throw in a guy like Henry Letowski. I think that could be a very good group in 2024 that is going to get that run game going in a massive way for Nebraska.
And that's frankly why I think you want to see more physicality and a little more straight at you run style with those kind of power schemes, because you want to play to your strengths. I think the two guards are going to be the best offensive linemen on this team.
I think so too.
What you saw from Evans-Jenkins started to make you think like this guy's going to be something, and really obviously a young player last year, but you saw him be able to run guys off the football. Mezcua, I think, very similar vein, big, physical, likes to run that inside power kind of rushing attack. And that, to me, you want to play to the two guys who I think are going to be the anchors. And I think it's those two guys. And I think you could throw Ben Scott in there. I thought, again, to echo what you said, really did a good job on those Iowa defensive tackles, being able to move him. And that's a tough unit. That's probably the toughest unit aside from Michigan that they saw all year. And I thought him and Letowski especially, I thought they stood tall, played really good.
Playing to your personnel is such a massive point of college football. Like you get what you have on your roster, and you got to put them in positions to be successful. And I think that's how you get these guys to be successful on the inside. And before we move on to the tackle position, I wouldn't be surprised if you're here and coming the end of fall camp, like Grant Bricks, Preston Tumoa, like those guys are built to play early for Nebraska. Obviously, both super talented individuals. Like you feel good about not only the starting three on the inside, but the depth that you're going to have as well. Now, kicking to the tackle spot, I mean, Teddy and Bryce, I thought played really, really good football towards the end of that year for Nebraska. You have those two as your start, and we'll talk about Turner Cochran, who is a guy that I wonder if you see kick on the inside. To be straight up, like from what you saw from Turner Cochran this year early on before he got banged up, and last year in 2022, I mean, that can't be your starter at tackle in this offense. He's too much of a liability in pass protection, does not have a great anchor, is not a very fluid athlete in space, which makes me think that maybe he can move in to the inside. But you talk about a guy like Teddy, who 174 pass blocking opportunities, only 14 pressures. Bryce Benhart, 337 pass blocking opportunities, only 22 pressures. mean, those guys both showed improvement and I think can be solid bookend tackles for this Nebraska offensive line unit heading into 2024.
And they both got the look you want, like big, tall, lean. I mean,
lengthy,
but also can play physical, especially Benhart. I think for that, to be a thinner offensive lineman, I guess, plays really physical, can move guys around. So again, fits the scheme that they want to run. But I think you're right. That is the one concern for Nebraska at that tackle spot is a depth spot, because I really don't know who the third guy is going to be. Is it going to be one of the young guys? It probably will have to be, because I'm kind of with you. I don't think Corcoran can go back in there and play tackle anymore.
That's what you're looking at, and maybe Nebraska. I would guess as to how Nebraska and Matt Rule wants to play this out, and this kind of coincides with how he wants to develop this program. We want to see what we have in the facilities before we go out and go grab some guys, right? So you're going to see how spring practice plays out, and so all right, Teddy and Bryce, those guys can be our starting tackles in 2024. Who's tackle 3 and 4? And again, when you're trying to win postseason and win 12 games and, do what Nebraska wants to do, you have to have depth. It is hard to go through 12 games with the same starting 5. Nebraska saw that in 2023. So I would be surprised or wouldn't be surprised if Matt Rule goes through spring camp and evaluates what they have at tackle. Again, some young tackles that I think could be really good and say, oh yeah, we actually have some guys that we feel good about. And if you don't, that second transfer portal window, Matt Rule probably will add a tackle heading into fall camp. But you start looking at this unit and kind of tie a bow on this conversation. What I'm most excited for is going back to how we started this conversation. And that is, I'm excited for this unit to have an offense that plays to their strengths. And I don't think it's not Matt Rule or Satterfield's fault for them not doing that in 2023, because they just kind of had to cobble it together. Right? When you have the lack of passing attack that they had, you have to find creative ways to get your guys in space and get something going on the run game when you're seeing 8-man boxes. I don't think you'll see as heavy loaded boxes with the 2024 offense. And I think you'll be able to run your offense that's conducive to how this personnel grouping wants to play.
I will say, I think we're underrating how important it is to have running backs who can run a really good scheme. Because even you look in that Iowa game, I was like, man, this offensive line, I think they're playing better than what these rushing stats are going to say. Because again, they didn't really have that pure, kind of alpha dog running back. And I know they were getting banged up in that unit. Good. To add a guy like Dante Dowdle, who he's got the bones to be that type of running back where he can run a really good scheme, has good vision, has the ability. If you're left one-on-one,
I think you're just downhill. You're talking about 6'2", 215 pounds, physical, bouncing off, inviting contact. And this isn't necessarily a shot at Emmett Johnson. That's not necessarily his forte, right? He was a guy that I don't think Nebraska expected to play as much as they did, but Gabe Irvin goes down, Ramir Johnson goes down, Anthony Grant has trouble holding on to the football. You started having to lean on your running back for fall camp, who was probably running scout team, to be kind of your lead back. And that's not, I don't think, the position. That's, again, not me taking away from Emmett Johnson, as much as I don't think he necessarily was the running back that they wanted to lean on.
They needed the bell cow towards the end of the year. They really didn't have it given the injury situation. I really do think that's going to make a lot of difference, because I thought in some of those games there was meat on the bone that running backs are leaving.
Yeah, and turning, and this is something that we talk about, I think is one of the most underrated, and this is getting a little outside the offensive line, but a good conversation to have. Especially when you're Nebraska and you want to be methodical and move the football and establish the run, finding those hidden yards is massive. One thing we loved about Blake Corum at Michigan is he turned a 2nd and 8 run to a 2nd and 6. It turned 3rd and 4 into 3rd and 2. And kind of finding those hidden yards, falling forward, taking on contact. Emmett Johnson, again, was not necessarily that physical back that made that stuff happen. Gabe Irvin coming back, Dante Dowdle, those are the backs that I think can help Nebraska stay on schedule and kind of find those hidden yards. So, again, I'm excited about what this Nebraska offensive line unit can be, not only because you saw them progress in 2023, but I think they're going to run a scheme on offense that is going to get back to how this unit wants to play their football. Excited about this unit. We got Nebraska's defensive line unit coming up next Sunday. That's a unit that I'm extremely excited to get into. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. This is a blast. We love talking ball with you guys in the comment section. Would love to hear from you guys. And if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.